who is the mover of the motion, to proceed to reply. Senator Aaron, proceed to reply.
Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to appreciate all the senators that have taken time to speak on this very important motion. Initially, when I conceptualized this idea, my desire was that we will take time to reflect as a country and positively evaluate what has been a fairly decent run by former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and a very good representation of the country at a global stage. However, Mr. Speaker, to my utter dismay, I have seen a few people try to reduce it to be a contest about what President Ruto got wrong, as if he was on trial or as if he was the one that was running a campaign. You know, Mr. Speaker, being a politician, I have come to live with the reality that people will always see fault even when there's nothing to fault. And there are people who just for clickbaits and likes on TikTok and Facebook, Mr. Speaker, will say anything, even on topics that they are least prepared about. I listen to many people ignorantly speak about the conflict in DRC and matters on the global stage with very little, limited, scant information, Mr. Speaker, about either the position of Kenya on such matters and how it may have affected voting. I said when I was moving this motion today in the morning, Mr. Speaker, that it will be completely ignorant of anyone to try and first draw a deduction of this run by Prime Minister Raila based on speculations about who may have voted for us or not, for the very simple reason that this was a voting by secret ballot. So by the time you're coming here to tell us, oh, you know, because of DRC, I don't know, because of Sarawi and this other one, we did not get vote from this. Where did you know that those countries voted for us or they didn't vote for us, Mr. Speaker? There are 22 countries that stood firm with Kenya and our candidate for all the 6 rounds, Mr. Speaker. There has been no scientific way of establishing which are those countries, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, you know, you get mesmerized sometimes at the ignorance and the seriousness with which people posit those arguments before the House, Mr. Speaker, thinking that perhaps there is some revelation that they got overnight on who may have cast their vote in support of us or otherwise. Even if it was a trial on our stand on diplomatic issues, Mr. Speaker, I explained here in the morning. The first person to raise that argument was Senator Onyonka. And you know, the record bears me witness. Every time I challenged him, whether it was on the issue of DRC or the issue of Palestine and Gaza, the war in Gaza, Mr. Speaker, he said, let's keep that matter aside. Because I was able to demonstrate to them that the positions they have been arguing in televisions and here in Parliament are nothing but display of pure ignorance. Mr. Speaker, our stand is known on all these things. So I don't know why people want to reduce it to be an evaluation of the performance of the president in the international stage. I don't think there has ever been a president who has profiled Kenya in the international stage the way President William Ruto has been able to do it. Travel with him to international meetings and you will appreciate what a good job he has been able to do. There is a lot of interest in this country. That's why I asked the other day, and somebody mentioned to me, he told me, Senator, we don't understand your country anymore. Because reading online, reading newspapers, Mr. Speaker, listening to some of the senators like the ones that were speaking here, Senator Sifuna and the like, you would think that there is absolutely nothing going on in this country. Yet, investors, people that keep a keen, objective eye on the progress that is being made in Kenya are advising people, Mr. Speaker, that if there is a country to keep an eye on the African continent, it is Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Not one, not twice, not 3 times, Mr. Speaker, have I seen articles by people who objectively analyze the performance of countries and the things that are being done, both locally and the positioning that has been done of this country in the international stage, Mr. Speaker, that they appreciate that there is progress being made. 2 years ago, Mr. Speaker, we were at a debt distress level. We were basically on the verge, staring at an total economic collapse, Mr. Speaker. The president has been able to move the country from that particular state up to a point now, Mr. Speaker, where we are stable, where we are going to the market, where even global ranking institutions are beginning to paint a positive outlook, Mr. Speaker, of our economy. And you just find people here say, oh, hey, this and that is not right. Mr. Speaker, in fact, it was a mistake. Even on the part, I want to fold the office of a speaker, Mr. Speaker, because in our standing orders, you cannot discuss the conduct of a friendly head of state without a substantive motion. It's in our standing orders, Mr. Speaker. Yet I have seen people discuss friendly nations and the local matters in that particular country, Mr. Speaker, with wanton recklessness. That should not be the case. Senator Cheruiyot tried, Mr. Speaker, to bring it to the attention of the Speaker when that matter first showed up this afternoon, when we had the visiting delegation from Uganda, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, maybe the way in which he sought the attention of the Speaker was not impressive enough, and the Speaker reserves the right of whether to allow one to make their point or not, but it is not proper. And many senators need to be acquiesced themselves with our standing orders, Mr. Speaker, that do not allow that kind of a behavior, Mr. Speaker. Even this issue that people are talking about of what happened today, that, oh, you are hosting rebels, this or the other. Kenya is a proud member of the international community. Many times, people rush here when their countries are in conflict, Mr. Speaker. The same people that are faulting us and saying, why did you allow Besigye to be picked and they are lifted from Nairobi, today have a problem that part of the faction that is warring in Sudan is here in the country. So which is which? If you want us to lock the country to anybody that is under siege in their own country, Mr. Speaker, then let that be your stand. But you cannot on one hand say that you need to keep this one here, but the other one you need to release. Kenya, over the years, has made significant contribution to regional stability, including almost every other East African country, Mr. Speaker, that every other time they've had conflict, people have negotiated here. I want to believe that part of negotiation, Mr. Speaker, includes allowing the warring parties, Mr. Speaker, to have access to your country. Who says if one of the entities has come and pitched tent here, Mr. Speaker, that we support whatever they are doing? We are a proud member of the international stage, Mr. Speaker, and I know for a fact that when people seek to either congregate here or find a safe haven if they feel unsafe in their country, there are millions of refugees that continue to ply their trade, Mr. Speaker, or make a living in this country as they go about their business. You remember even the issue of DRC a few months ago, where when DRC protested and said, why did you allow so-and-so to speak? Our answer was plain and simple. This is a free country. When people come here, they enjoy the rights. This is a country where you insult even the president and nobody does anything about you. So it will be very difficult for us to reserve and say only Kenyans are allowed certain rights and foreigners are not permitted of the same, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to request the colleagues that want to do an evaluation of Kenya's performance on the diplomatic stage to perhaps present a substantive motion, come before the Senate Standing Committee on Defense and Foreign Relations, Mr. Speaker, and raise the issue that they have. But to reduce such an important motion, you know, Mr. Speaker, where you find you want to score cheap points and appear as if you're the one who's most knowledgeable, you know, on these matters which you are ill-prepared to comment about, because the things that you're speaking for, if people who understand things better listen to you, they cringe in their seats because they are wondering who elected this one. Mr. Speaker, I want to plead with colleagues that there are matters, I said this in the morning when I was moving this motion, that there are things that should divide us. We can surely have difference of opinion when it comes to matters local politics. But when shall we ever grow and mature politically to appreciate that, for example, when a Kenyan shows up at the international stage, Mr. Speaker, then they represent our flag. They represent us as an entire people. If you're not a candidate in that particular exercise, competing with them, Mr. Speaker, then the least that you can do, look away if you don't like that particular person. At least at the very worst, Mr. Speaker, just keep quiet. But if you're a patriot, take time to celebrate them and lend their support, Mr. Speaker. But not to do the kind of things that we saw being done when the Prime Minister was making his run, touring African countries. There are people who posting pictures when President said, oh, today I had dinner with former Prime Minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga. You go to the comment sections, Kenyans are even more than citizens of that particular country with their stupid tribal politics, Mr. Speaker, importing it all the way to the international stage. And then you find leaders here in this house trying to justify that, oh, yeah, let people express themselves. Express what? Ignorance. Mr. Speaker, leadership also involves telling people that this is not right, that we don't agree with you in this particular. Why are you a leader then? I thought a leader, part of your duty, is also to show the way in certain matters that you're well prepared for. Mr. Speaker, I want to appreciate those that understood the spirit of this motion and took their time to critically evaluate and celebrate that a Kenyan, a prominent one, an eminent one at that, Mr. Speaker, gave a good account of himself on the international stage, and now people know better about Kenya and our credentials. I did mention, Mr. Speaker, that it is okay for people to have their opinion. But you know, the most ignorant of the lot, Mr. Speaker, are the ones that have tried to reduce this conversation to be about the evaluation of President William Ruto. He was not a candidate there. Prime Minister Raila Odinga himself said it on that night on the 15th, that there is nothing that the government of Kenya led by President William Ruto stopped at or withheld in terms of support in his candidature. And he said, I appreciate that about this. So who else can come here and tell us, oh, you know, this was not done right, this should have been this way or the other? If the candidate himself appreciates that the country did everything that was humanly possible, and we only ended up losing because elections are what they are. Sometimes people choose not to see or appreciate issues the way you perceive them. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, let it go on record that this House appreciates the decent run, the good presentation at the international stage of this eminent Kenyan, that there are lessons that the country has learned, so that in future, because there will be other Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, who will show up at the international stage looking for employment opportunities, either in global institutions, Mr. Speaker, or even at the UN, Mr. Speaker. And there are things that we can surely do better as a country. I want to appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the seconder of this motion, Senator Moses Kajwang, because it is he who reminded us that with this negative energy, very soon we will transfer it even to matters like sports, things which ordinarily have always united us. That you'll find Harambee Stars playing, and because maybe there's a certain player that you don't like, or this or the other, Mr. Speaker, then you'll find people, you know, either cheering the other country or wishing ill fate on our own team. We must nip it at the bud while it is still early, Mr. Speaker, and be able to tell each other. You know, the other day, Mr. Speaker, we laid to rest celebrated veteran journalist Leonard Mambo Mbotela. It is on such matters that he will ask, Je, hu ni ungwana? Is this really decent of us, Mr. Speaker, to continue to do these kind of things? Therefore, I want to conclude, Mr. Speaker, by expressing the three things that this motion intended to do when we set it out this morning, which is, one, to express the thanks of the Senate to the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga, to appreciate that he gave a good account of this country, that this Senate notes that despite the fact that he may not have won, Mr. Speaker, that it was not because of anything in his own capacity, but given that this was a competition and there were other judges, Mr. Speaker, that they may have held different views. But as a country, we are proud of him and the work that he was able to do. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, is to record the thanks of this House to His Excellency the President William Ruto for stepping up, Mr. Speaker, and ensuring that a man whom they fiercely competed in the last presidential election and was separated on only by barely 200,000 votes, Mr. Speaker, enjoyed the support and the full backing of the government of Kenya with no restraint, Mr. Speaker. And that is what a decent country should do, because this is an important job. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm reminded, I saw last weekend another member of parliament from the National Assembly. I don't want to take him seriously anyway. I think he's the MP for Juja or something. I don't want to take him seriously because I read elsewhere, I don't know if it is true, that the only document that gentleman has is a driver's license. Therefore, the kind of things you're saying about, I don't know how much was spent, is expected of such characters, Mr. Speaker. But the point is, Kenya should not have held back.
Leader of majority,
yes.
I may as well remind you that the said member has since recorded a statement before the police and has been charged before court.
No, today he was charged for forgery, not for the misleading comments that he said about what Kenya did, I don't know, in the candidature. apart from having a driver's license, probably, which is also maybe forged, Mr. Speaker, probably even the other documents, that is what the court will be told later on, that we record appreciation to the President for the kind of support that was accorded to Prime Minister Raila by the Republic of Kenya. Third and final, Mr. Speaker, is that the Senate of the Republic of Kenya record a congratulation to His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf on his election as the chairperson of the Commission, AUC Commission, on Saturday, 15th February 2025. We are true Democrats, Mr. Speaker, and even though we competed and it was intense and difficult, the winners eventually have their say. And therefore, because we are part of this African continent, Mr. Speaker, we will have to work with him. I pointed out earlier that, for example, the President is leading the reform exercise on the AU, Mr. Speaker. And part of the things that he'll have to achieve will include working with this gentleman. Much as we felt very bad that he grabbed the trophy that we so desperately needed, Mr. Speaker, we still congratulate and wish him well, because his success is the success of Africa. The success of Africa is the success of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we should take such moments to celebrate them, much as we may disagree with him on many of the things. The only thing that perhaps maybe I will point out as a simple measure of courtesy, Mr. Speaker, is to be gracious even in victory, Mr. Speaker, because I saw a video. Probably maybe the people that did the translation may not be honest. I'm aware that we live in the information age and sometimes not everything is accurate. I saw a video of him somewhere back home in Djibouti alongside his president, and he said certain things that perhaps didn't sit well with the rest of us as a country. But who knows? It could be the wrong translation. Since I don't speak Arabic, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to bear witness, but I want to believe that that gentleman will serve the continent of Africa and celebrate and do all the things that we need to do. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish to end it at that and celebrate what has been achieved and said this afternoon. The various unhelpful comments notwithstanding, but many colleagues, 90% of the people that spoke actually stayed on tune. Apart from the usual, Mr. Speaker, that you'd expect in any political conversation, I still appreciate that many people rose to the occasion and appreciated what this motion was about. It was just about celebrating an eminent Kenyan, appreciating the President, and congratulating the eventual winner. The long and short of all these things that have been said this afternoon were about those three things, which I believe have been ably done by members of this House, using whatever form of shade and color that they have said. With those many comments, many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order number 66.3, I beg to request that the deferring of the question be held to a later date. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senate Majority Leader. And first one to Standing Order 66.3, the putting of the question to this motion is hereby deferred to the next sitting of the House. Very well. Clerk, you may call the next order.